Welcome to another episode of the Unconventional Christian Podcast. I'm your host, Ladun Thompson, and I'm here with the amazing, the all-healing Dr. Cassandra Hutchins. How are you today?
I'm good.
I'm happy to have you on here. And before we start, we usually start with a prayer. So you can bow your heads wherever you are listening today. Father God, thank you for bringing us here today. Thank you for allowing us to come to this space. Father God, we thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation. We're thankful for each and every person that is listening. We're asking that you sit us down and you stand up and you take lead of this conversation and allow this conversation to be helpful and healing and helpful to whoever needs it. Father God, we thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So, Dr. Cassandra Hutchins, first of all, just give us a little spiel about who you are and where you come from.
Okay. So, I'm a clinical psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
Where do I come from?
Yeah.
Such an interesting question. Well, I'm from DC. And my dad is Cuban. My mom is African American.
Okay.
So my upbringing was very diverse.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritually speaking, my dad was Catholic, but he also practiced like Santeria on the side.
Yeah.
And my mom was or is Christian.
Okay.
We were raised in a Baptist church. So had a nice mixture there in my background. Currently stationed in New Jersey.
Nice. Yeah. So you're from Jersey?
Always DC. Always from DC.
What made you get into psychology specifically?
So, when I was younger, I somehow became the person that people would always come to like tell their problems to help them get through tough stuff. And it wasn't until I went into Rutgers, my first year, I was a business major, and I was taking all these business classes and I'm like, I'm going to fail every last one of these business classes. And I took a psychology elective and I was like, this is it. I instantly knew that was exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And it all clicked.
Right.
And made sense. And here we are.
So now with that being said, because you brought that up, do you believe that you are a healer?
I believe that I'm a vessel for healing. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that God speaks through me, and in that I am able to help people on their healing journeys to heal.
So do you feel like there are people specifically in this earth that are more, not saying more anointed, but are led by God in this healing process more than others?
I do.
More even to the space that they are, people are draw to them specifically because of that.
I do.
Yeah. So no, because I want to touch on that because a lot of people, some people are licensed in healing, but then there are people whose spirits are healing.
Yeah.
Now for people who are naturally lean into that space, who heals the healer?
You have to have a tribe. You have to have a support system. You have to take time to give you what you need. The healers need to take time to give themselves what they need. So I meditate, I ground. I'm actively targeting things that come up for me that feel heavy.
Yeah.
I'm not letting anything just kind of get swept under the rug. I can't. I don't have time for that.
Right. And for you, now just being in this community that we are, and it's a great, beautiful thing to see how much healing is a conversation that we are having. Do you feel as though I guess if you want to say our community is doing the necessary steps to lean into that space?
I think that some people are. Absolutely. I think that now more than ever, mental health and spirituality practices are becoming widely accepted, especially in our community. And I think the new generations are really helping to spearhead that by just talking about how important it is to uncover the things that are dark, the things that we suffer through suffer with on our own, and like bringing them into the light.
Right. For you, both your parents, are your parents still together?
No.
Okay, now coming up, because we do come up specifically, I'll say, and I always say my community, which is, I'm from the inner city, and I feel like a lot of children have grown up in what you would call broken homes. They come from homes where it's either single parent homes or even homes where both parents are absent. And that's where a lot of trauma begins for people. For you, what was your first experience with trauma?
When I was a kid, I was sexually abused. At the time, I don't know that I would have classified that as a traumatic experience, because what I did was I learned to just sort of disassociate from that experience. And I guess that was my way of surviving through it.
Right.
If I were younger and you asked me this question, I would say the death of my grandmother was the first traumatic experience. And that happened after my sexual abuse experience, when I was 17. And she suddenly passed away. And that was really tough for me to get through. So that hardship, that traumatic moment, I felt in the moment. My sexual abuse experience, I would say I felt later on in life. It would, I would have little triggers that would bring out feelings attached to that moment, thoughts attached to that moment, that led me to really understand, like, okay, this is something I really need to pay attention to.
Right. For those people who have been sexually abused and have done probably exactly the same thing, because there are a lot of people that have gone through those moments, and what they've done is they've locked it away internally somewhere. How does that show up for some people?
That's a great question. So, it's a loaded question. It can show up in our relationships. It can show up and what I'm noticing now in our parenting. So with my daughter, I'm very protective over her. She cannot just stay at anyone's houses. She definitely really can't spend the night out. And let's not even bring in any uncles or cousins, cause that's a no, right? Because what research does show is that, a lot of sexual abuse experiences happen with loved ones, because how many regular people get that close to your children? Not many, right? It's usually somebody that we know. So I'm seeing it more so with her now.
Right.
But trust issues, choices in relationship partners, self-image, sexual promiscuity, so many different ways.
Yeah. When you said partners, when people, so they're more likely to choose what type of person, or is it, different? I
don't know if it's a certain person. I think it's more so of what that individual brings out of you.
Right.
So that individual can, display a number of questionable behaviors, but it's really about what it's doing for you. Because sometimes if our trauma is unprocessed, we are attracted to situations that are still familiar to us. So toxic can still be a familiar feeling.
All right.
Pain can still be a familiar feeling. And so we can get ourselves into new relationship experiences that just bring out new feelings of pain that were familiar to us in our childhood.
Okay. And something else you touched on was the just being I guess we would say oversexualized. When you said that people tend to be that way. You know what I'm saying? Or tend to show up that way because of the trauma from their childhood. Because we live in a society where sex is super promoted. You know what I'm saying? We can't shake that, right? And a lot of people feel as though a lot of people turn to that. Some people don't realize that they turn to that. Some people say, I don't drink, I don't smoke, but they're overly sexual. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know I don't know how to explain that, but how does that look? Or how does that show up in some women?
That's a great question. So it can look like her offering her body instead of her mind. it could look like her using her body as a protective mechanism, right? Like you can have this physical part of me, but nothing deeper than that. And how I really like to explain it is like what they are trying to do is kind of take control over their pain, right? So like now I'm in control over what this pain feels like versus like someone else being in control over it, which is what happened earlier on in their lives.
So it's a perspective though, because they feel like they're in control.
Always.
And they feel, because I've seen so many women that I'm friends with or I've come across, and they jump into relation. They meet somebody and we're 3 days in and we're already having sex. And, you know, I'm not judging anybody for what they do, but then the relationship doesn't work out and they do it again and again and again and again. And they're like, yo, why can't I meet a nice guy? And then it's a conversation. It's like, you know, I think the hardest thing to say to someone that you're friends with is like, I can joke around with somebody and be like, wait, did you give up the box already? Like, you gave it up already? And they're like, yeah, we have fun that night. You know, but it's like, really, it's a cycle that continues.
Yeah.
And so what are your suggestions to some people who are going through those and need to begin that healing process? Because first, I think, is identifying it.
Absolutely. That's always the first step. We have to just be aware of it. And we have to be open to changing, because change is hard. We are very habitual creatures.
What's that percentage?
I don't know the percentage.
No, because I've always stated, but I always, maybe I'll look it up soon, but I do remember like the percentage of, it's like, I swear, I think it's like 89% of people are not even actually capable of change, because once you're stuck in the habit,
we're all capable of it.
Yeah, but there's that percentage that there's the Google percentage, but then it's also like the reality of what we're able to do.
Yeah, it's tough, but we are powerful beings. So, we can do anything that we really put our minds to, but we have to be open to that. And that is the part that comes in our own timing. So even if you tell one of your homies, maybe that'll be the moment where you're saying something to them that they kind of like hear you, but it doesn't click for them yet. And like, maybe they have to go through a few more hard moments in order for them to see it all. And then make the decision to change. But that could take years, Yeah. And sometimes it never happens, right? Just depending on the person.
Sometimes it never happens. Okay, now speaking of the trauma that's happening, I just say within our community, right? Now we're talking about the cycle of broken homes and so many people who have grown up in so many different backgrounds. Some people grew up in survivor mode. Some people grew up in houses full of love. But we have all these people who are trying to come together, but we have different communication styles. And unfortunately, I don't think people are having the necessary conversations to really fully understand each other before you jump into a relationship and have children together. What are your suggestions for like just people in our community as far as when it comes to picking partners? You know what I'm saying? What are some necessary steps that a lot of young people, because a lot of our subscribers are people who are in their 25, 35 demographic, and they're looking to figure out, starting families. So what's your advice to some of our young people as far as making those steps, when choosing life partners?
Yeah, I always say date yourself first. Find out how to fall in love with yourself first.
Right.
Find what that feels like. Find what that needs to look like. Try to identify what you need for you so that any partner that comes in, they will already be reflecting some of that. And if someone does come in and they're not reflecting what you need back to you, then you'll notice it quicker. You'll notice when something doesn't feel right or sound right. And you'll be able to make decisions before getting into something more long-term or substantial to sort of exit if you need to.
Right.
So finding what you need first is ideal. And for those of us who maybe have already jumped into long-term relationships and then we're realizing, okay, there's some trauma stuff coming up. We're having some difficulties because of whatever it is. It takes that awareness first, and then it takes, a dual commitment. Both of you have to be willing to do something different together.
Right.
And when that is not possible, let's say it's just one of us who's committed to healing, then I say focus on that. I say that all the time, especially because I'm in a marriage, right? And on my spiritual journey, there were times when my husband didn't understand it. He's full-on Christian, so there are times where he just didn't understand what I was doing. I have a meditation room, in my meditation room, or where I was in my journey, but I had to do that for me. And so that at times felt like a very lonely journey.
Right.
I wouldn't say lonely. I take that back because I do have, support systems, but it felt like a solo journey when speaking about the marriage itself, So sometimes we have to do things for ourselves whenever we feel like it needs to be done with or without our partners. And then the hope is that, at some point they either catch up or you two find some other healthy space that you can coexist in. Right.
No, that's good. I think it's important to hear and see that, that you guys are on this journey together as a husband and wife, as a husband and wife duo. But in the same token, you're still on your individual journeys of trying to figure out what works for you and what makes you happy.
Yeah, because we're ever changing.
Yeah.
That's how they grow apart in marriages, because we're changing at all points of our lives, ideally. And so, some people wake up, 20 years later and they're like, I don't even know who you are. Like, why are you, I don't want to be with you anymore.
Right.
And so, but for me, it's a conscious process. I'm very conscious of how I am evolving and what I need. And yes, I have the background there to help me out with that, my psychological background there. But for other people, it's just all about tuning in with yourself.
Right.
You just have to know what feels right. I always tell my patients, follow the feeling. Follow the feeling. Does it feel comfortable? Do you feel like your genuine self? Does it feel effortless? That's one of my favorite words.
Effortless.
Relationships, of course, do not always feel effortless, but we want it the majority of the time to feel like just an effortless union.
Effortless and seamless.
Effortless and seamless. So following the feeling. Right?
Yeah.
How does something feel to me? Do I feel comfortable in this moment? Who am I today? Right. So even with the younger generations, just there's a lot of self-identity crisis. Just figuring out what it is we're supposed to be doing in our lives and who we are meant to be. I'm seeing that a lot lately. And, there's no clear answer to that, of course, but I always tell them, you have to do one thing maybe in order to get to the next thing. And some steps we just can't skip.
Yeah.
So it's all about really just tuning in, taking that time to tune in with yourself just to see what you need in those moments before entering relationship experiences or new life experiences in general.
So for you, before you actually got married, and what was the journey like of figuring out who Cassandra was? Like the healing process? Because, I'm sure there's levels of intentionality, or if there wasn't and you figured that you got married and you was like, I still got to work on myself. Because you're always working on yourself, but the intentionality of saying, before I move forward in this marriage, in this relationship, that I've done the necessary work on myself in order for me to give my best self to somebody else. What was that journey like for you?
So I wouldn't say that I was already in that space of full on consciousness. But I was half in, half out. And so this is what I mean. Before I met my husband, I was already practicing like law of attraction in smaller ways, though, like, you know, trying to attract or manifest parking spaces when I worked in Newark. And just also noticing like what some of my hard moments in life were, and just being aware of them. I wasn't really processing much at that time. And before I met him, 8 months before I met him, I had like wrote a list of all of the qualities that I wanted in a partner.
Right.
Based off of, and this is what I always tell my patients, I wrote the list based off of everything that didn't work previously. So I took all of my old relationship experiences and I said, okay, I like that, I didn't like that. And from that, I was able to create a list of desires. Mm-hmm. And I just wrote the list, and I don't even really know what I did with it after that. I just kind of released it. Yeah. So it's the releasing of it, I think, that's important.
The law of attraction and the law of detachment.
Yeah.
All in one, right?
All in one. And he came in 8 months later. And even at that point, you know, I wouldn't say that it was love at first sight, mm-hmm. but it took some shifts in perspective for us to both like understand each other. And from there, like once that happened, it was like an instant shift.
And we were dig deeper. What's these shifts like?
So my husband and I are very opposite.
Okay.
And so early on, I was like a little bit off-putting to me. I felt like he was arrogant. He was like overly talkative, overly friendly. And I'm just like, ugh. And I had a friend at that time. And she said, he's opposite of you. That could, you know, you two could balance each other out. And that's literally all I needed to hear.
Really?
That was it. It just clicked for me. And I was like, you're right. He had everything on my list that I'd asked for, you know? And so sometimes we can be in our own ways, right? Like God will send something and we'll be like, I don't know, God, is that it? Because like, it's literally everything you ask for, but then our own fears, our insecurities, you know, will come in, you know, they'll start to surface and cloud us,
right?
You know? So, but it was in that moment instantly that I shifted. I was able to shift and we were able to move through that.
Oh, that's fire. That's dope, because I know a lot of times people get stuck in what they want versus what they need.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like there are, especially, and I always talk about it in our community when we talk about women who have like daddy issues. Now, some women will be naturally drawn to men who are like their amazing father, and then some women are naturally drawn to men who are like the father who was not available.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The things that they might have hated about their father is the same things that they were drawn to. Yeah. Why is that?
That's their focus. So same thing with law of attraction, right? Whatever you start to focus on is what you'll start to experience. And so I tell my patients, it's just a simple shift, because if you're focusing on everything that didn't work in your life, then you're going to get more of that. Right. So if you're focused on, oh, my dad wasn't there, or he was, you know, inconsistent, or, you know, unreliable, whatever it is, right, that you were still holding on to, you'll start to see that resurface in your different relationship experiences, until you shift to say, okay, well, instead I would have preferred someone who was reliable, consistent, loving, who showed me love in this way. Right. And then as soon as that becomes the focus, that's what you'll start to look for. Sorry.
No, because, you know, and when you say that, and then you said that you and your husband are opposites, there are people who will dwell on that and say, oh my God, we are so different.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And allow that to be the thing that drives them apart. Yeah. But then in all reality, we are different, but most of the time people do check off 80% of what you need in your life. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And I just last part I want to touch on, because I know I started touching on that. Now, daddy issues with women, like a lot of people do have that. You know, I hear them say it, and there's so many different versions of what daddy issues are.
Yes.
Right? How do we begin to deal with those? Like, as far as, I'll say to our women audience, you know what I'm saying? Some women will say, I have daddy issues. I have this. My dad wasn't in my life. My dad was in my life, but he wasn't there. Or they've even experienced the loss of their dads in their lives. So starting to deal with that, how does any woman begin to deal with that? It's a very vague, very broad question, but
simply put, I would suggest that they start to notice everything that didn't work out with dad, everything they didn't like, everything they would have desired to have been different.
Yeah.
And start to focus on what the opposite of that is. It's that simple. So every single thing that they didn't like, what's the opposite of it?
Okay.
And it's difficult to say that you're just gonna say, oh, I have these daddy issues and like this is what it did to me and this is who I am as a result of it. Because usually in our experiences, something can trigger that, right? So if you have a daddy issue, you may be fine for years until that one person comes in and like brings something out of you that reminds you of an old part of yourself, that childhood part of yourself.
Right.
So really that's that's a lifelong journey.
Right. Of what you would say.
Of healing.
Healing that, inner child?
Healing.
Because I hear people say it, but I just want to make sure
people
I'm
love
saying
to say that. Yes, we can say that. But, there can be parts from our childhood and adolescence and even young adulthood that are still sort of factoring into who we are today. So, but yes, it starts from the inner child.
Okay. Okay, good. So jumping to another ship here, we're jumping into faith, right? Okay. Faith, you growing up I would say you grew up in a Christian household, right? Mm-hmm. And now bridging that gap with psychology, because ideally for the first part of our lives, it was like, for me growing up in a Christian household, if there was anything going on, we're going to pray it away.
Yeah.
We're going to pray it away. We're going to fast on it. And, we know God going to turn it around. But and when we used to talk about therapy and going to a doctor, in church, you'd hear them say, oh, don't let the doctor tell you about yourself, this and that. How do we bridge that? Like now, because the conversation is shifting a whole lot more. I'm not sure if it's shifting fast enough because there's still a lot of people who don't believe in psychology. They don't believe in the science of mental health. But then also there are young people like myself, who are working on figuring out how to bridge that gap because it's necessary. Yeah. I think one, biblically, you've seen, if you can pay attention to certain biblical characters, like even somebody like Paul, who says, I die every day. You know what I'm saying? He talks about like that inner pain. There's certain lines, if you pay attention to it biblically and you pay attention to a character, and you see that even then there were psychological issues that they were dealing with that, affected them. So how do we get to the place now where we begin to bridge that gap?
So in my therapy sessions, I'm very flexible. So it's really based off of what their belief systems are. But if they are religious or spiritual in any way, we say, okay, well, what are those beliefs, right? So I like to say that we all have different roles.
Right.
And, God has God's role, know. If you own a restaurant, you can't, take the money, feed the people, cook the food. Everybody has to have their own role. And so we say, okay, if I believe in God and I believe that there is this higher power out there that is working in my favor and who wants me to live this beautiful and abundant life, yet I'm down here being human, worrying, trying to over manipulate, over control things, do everything on my own, then that goes against your beliefs.
All right.
So we say, okay, psychologically speaking, what are the thoughts that are coming up for you? Why are these thoughts coming up? Where did they come from? And how can we shift them to bridge? How can we shift them to start to build in your faith, right? To use your faith to reinforce these new thoughts, these new beliefs, these new desires that you have in your life.
Right.
So it's a two-part system. We use both sides of it to reinforce the other.
So right now in this time and day and age, when it comes to when you hear faith without works is dead, right? So having faith, like when people are going through seasons of what you would say anxiety, some people are dealing with depression and they're preying on it, you know what I'm saying? But they're not doing the groundwork necessary to deal with these things, or whatever causes these, what triggers are there. What can anyone do to support somebody going through those times? You know what I'm saying? Especially, we're talking about a lot of people that do listen to this are believers of some sort. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's believers in Christ, whether you just believe in a higher power, but in the same token, we're watching people who are constantly going through these levels of grief and depression, and they're trying to figure out how to support them, but they don't know how to. Like, what do you suggest?
Specific prayers.
Yeah.
So if that's all you can do, that's why I always say, like, what is it exactly that's going on with you? You know, it's not to get in your business, but like, what is it what are your specific needs? Because I believe in being as specific as possible in our prayers whenever we're trying to affirm anything into our lives. And so if a person is struggling with a depression, for example, then we can pray that, you know, whatever those belief systems are or life experiences are that are factoring into that moment, help to resolve for that person.
Right.
And that something in their life helps them to feel better, you know, help them to see the light more. We can always affirm for other people what we think they need.
Okay. I understand that, because a lot of people that, you know, like I'll say I deal with and I talk to every day, and they're dealing with these specific things, and maybe even in the space now, a lot of the conversation does come about where we're talking about therapy, and people don't have access to therapy.
Yeah.
But, you know, and that also, you know, let's segue into my doc in the box. Your doc in the box.
Your doc in the box.
See, I tried so hard not to say that, but your doc in the box.
Yeah.
How can your doc in the box, which is something you created, tell us about that?
So they are the only set of therapy cards that give psychological responses to the questions. And where I got these questions from was from years of therapy sessions. And what I was noticing is that it doesn't matter our age or gender or race, we all experience a lot of the same difficulties in silence. And so I took a lot of the common questions that have been asked of me and put them in these sets of cards, and then I added my psychology-based responses, which is what I would say to a patient in a session. And so they are really meant for people who don't have access to therapy regularly, and also for people who suffer at home in silence, which is everyone.
Yeah, because the pandemic really opened Pandora's box for a lot of people. And it's so crazy going through the pandemic. We were also going through, I think if anyone would call it, our own version of the civil rights era.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We saw so much going on, especially with the George Floyd situation, which was a catalyst to, which was going on like dead in the middle of the pandemic. How do we as a people begin to heal from those things that we've seen generationally? Because generational trauma is real.
Yes, it is.
So, and how is, I guess the real question I'd say to you is, how is generational trauma showing up in us right now?
Anger, intense sadness, isolation. But to your first question, I find that talking about this stuff really helps. I was really noticing that all of my patients, didn't even matter their background, were being impacted by what they were seeing in the news and what was actually happening in real life. They were all suffering. Asians, Caucasian, a lot of African Americans.
Right.
For African American women, I created a group therapy session because I was noticing that they were suffering in silence, just being in different career fields, being African American, being woman, female. So I gave them a space to all kind of come together and to unite in that way, to support each other in that way, because it feels much better when we find that, one, we're not alone, and two, someone understands us, and three, it's okay to feel how we feel.
Right.
So for people who don't have access to therapy, I think it is very important for us to have a support system where we do feel safe enough to talk about all of the tough things that are coming up for us, instead of trying to suffer through them on our own silently.
Right. Because I think it's a lot. There are definitely a lot of women that don't have that access. They don't have insurance. They don't have great accountability partners, because just being in the environment that they've been in, like a lot of times they don't have the right people around them, and it's necessary to have groups like this. What are your suggestions for people who are looking for some access to therapy right now? Because, a lot of times you've heard about different things, but maybe, you have some insight into some programs that are available.
I don't know about specific programs. I have 2 platforms that I usually recommend people to. But also nowadays, I know like the Taraji P. Henson, there are different therapy platforms that they have created to make therapy more accessible to people. Sliding scales, right. Insurance. I take insurance. And yeah, so just the sliding scales. I'm definitely seeing a lot more of that. So being able to pay what you can afford for therapy, I'm seeing a lot more of that.
A lot more
come up in different platforms.
Okay, and with that, why is it that maybe in our communities it's so hard for us to find therapists of color?
Yeah, I know that there aren't as many African American psychologists out there, but there are many, licensed clinical social workers who can also provide therapy that are African American, licensed, professional counselors, African American. Right. So I think that it's up to the person first. Once they decide that they really want something, you just have to have faith. Yeah. Start looking, faith with action, start looking for someone and just see what comes up. You'll be surprised. Okay.
Cool. I do have, we have this thing which is called the Rapids.
Okay.
And so I wanted to touch on the Rapids before we wrap. But actually, I'm sorry, I did forget. I do have one more question for you.
Okay.
The courageousness that comes with asking for help when someone is going through a crisis in their life, whether it's depression, whether it's feeling like some people, even speaking of people who are bipolar, right? Like sometimes there are things in life that trigger that, and realizing that, hey, that's who I am. I am dealing with that emotion, dealing with feeling depressed. Why is it so hard for people to ask for help? That so much to the point that some people just would rather internalize that and suffer in silence.
Yeah, because it feels lonely. It feels like a lonely experience. So if you're the only one going through something, then why would we want to burden someone else with that? And going back into the African American community, a lot of us were raised to keep everything in the household, to just only pray about it and just, let the rest go. And so if that's what we were taught and that's what was normalized for us early on, then, a lot of us continue to perpetuate that throughout our lives, holding it in, keeping it in the house, not talking about it.
And how does that show up for a lot of people? Because there are a lot of people who are dealing with physical ailments, right?
Yeah.
So we have physical ailments that we can't source. We go to the doctor. It's like, yo, doc, my stomach hurts. You know what? Before I even go into I do have these Rapids. Before I go into that, I would love to touch on that real quick. For men, physically, how does I'm not going to say just trauma, but how does the side effects of your mental health and spiritual health being in turmoil, how does that show up for men?
Yeah. Look, I mean, men are no different from women. The symptoms of holding these things in looks like an anxiety. It looks like having racing thoughts, having self-doubt, maybe not showing up to something in your full self, as your full self, feeling sad on your own,
All right.
having feelings of insecurity, being sad. Those symptoms come from what we're holding on, but it doesn't matter if you're male or female.
Okay, but the physical side effects.
Physical side effects. So for men, I can't specifically respond
for both.
to.
Let's just say
for
both.
females, we see like fibromyalgia come up.
That's a side. That's a side effect.
That is an effect of having different abusive experiences in your life and holding your body, still holding on to that.
So for those who don't know what fibromyalgia is,
so it's different pains in the body that you really just can't identify where it's coming from. And outside of that, when we're holding on to stress, local areas of that include like neck tension, you may have back pains, stomach knots. Our muscles hold on to all types of trauma. So you can really experience that anywhere in the body.
What about like, this is stuff we hear in the community, pH? Is that something that's affected?
What's a pH?
pH balance.
pH balance for females?
Yeah.
So absolutely. So if we're stressed out and our hormones become imbalanced, yes, that can offset our pH levels.
And for men, it's maybe like what levels of
testosterone,
aggression.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Now it makes me think about something, because this is, like I said, this unconventional question. These questions.
Yeah.
Like for me, these questions come my way all the time. So something that these things really like boggle my mind. So like when I speak of women that say, I want this specific kind of man, right? But they're naturally drawn to someone who may be not even just, because there's different decisions on what an alpha male looks like, right? But outside of an alpha male, we're talking about toxic. Some women know that they're attracted to toxic men. You know what I mean? And that is mainly because what? Because
they're still living in repressed or unprocessed old moments. Whether that's childhood or adulthood. Sometimes we just haven't come out of that yet. And so I always like to say we are the common denominator now.
All right.
So if we are still attaching ourselves to people that are similar, then we have to look at ourselves and go back and do some self-reflection, have moments of self-awareness and ask ourselves, what is it that I need to work on first before entering into anything new? It always comes back to the self.
Well, I'm gonna say this, like for a lot of people, do you recommend a lot of people do some like months of solitude?
I think that there is so much healing that comes out of solitude, and even if that's just for 5 minutes a day, I think that it's a necessary, because we have to be able to go in and quiet ourselves, just to listen, just to see what's coming up for us, consciously, unconsciously, and allow things to surface. I'm also a huge advocate in solitude, because I think that's where we get a lot of clarity from. And a lot of people are scared of that, because guess what? What you hear doesn't always feel good. If you have to change something with you and we don't like to change, then that's heavy too, and then we have the ego. Ego's like, well, I don't have to change. I'm fine. It's them. They're the toxic people, right?
Yeah.
So having to go in and really be with that's tough.
Solitude is the noise from solitude is deafening. Okay, so now I'm gonna jump into these rapids real quick.
Okay,
all right. So before we wrap, so it's name your go-to vegan dish.
Mac and cheese.
That's vegan cheese.
Yes.
Okay, all right, just making sure. We have some vegans who cheat.
Vegans who cheat?
Yes, they be like, I'm vegan.
But
I eat regular mac and cheese.
No, I had to really do a lot of experimenting, but they have some good vegan cheeses.
That's like people who are like, I'm not a Lakers fan, I'm a LeBron fan. So, 3 things you don't leave the home without.
My chapstick, my eyeglasses, my cell phone.
Cell phone. I was waiting to see if that cell phone wasn't going to be on that list.
It's on there.
Because you look like somebody who's like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I leave my phone.
No, I take my phone.
I need my phone.
Don't mean I want to talk to anybody, but I still take it.
If you had to stay in one place for a year, where would it be and why?
Oh, I visited Costa Rica earlier this year, and I was like, I could work here 3 months out of the year. It was just so beautiful. I felt so spiritually connected there. It was just a lot of nature. So there.
Who'd you go with?
I went with 4 other couples. No, individuals.
Okay.
3 couples.
Nice. This is an easy one. I know the answer to, but before I do that, I'm gonna ask it anyway. But I know the answer to it. Make $1 million or help 1 million people?
I gotta do both. I cannot have one or the other. I'm sorry.
You know what? Because we have such a negative association with money.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No. You can use money to do a lot of beautiful things.
Yeah. No, that's dope.
What did you think I was gonna say? You said you know the answer.
I thought you was gonna say help 1 million.
Help 1 million people? No, it has to be
because I
both.
feel like I help 1 million people, man. The
money will come.
The money's gonna come anyway.
That's true. I say follow the passion.
Follow the passion.
Yeah. If you're doing what you love, the money will come. I agree.
What's the most useless talent you have?
Useless? Oh, yeah. Okay, let me think about that. Useless talent.
Singing in the shower.
Eating.
Because you can eat.
Probably sleep. I love to sleep. I'm going to call that a talent.
You're a professional sleeper. Best purchase this year and worst purchase this year?
Best purchase this year.
Let me help you out. Air fryer.
No. Trip to Africa?
Trip to Africa was the best purchase this year?
Yep.
And the worst purchase this year?
No, I'll tell you what. My best purchase was my flight to Africa. We did business class. That was a life changer right there.
What part of Africa did you go to?
We were in Dar. We went from Dar to Tanzania, and Tanzania to Zanzibar.
Ooh.
So that flight purchase, that was the best purchase. The worst purchase this year. Maybe a t-shirt? That's a hard question.
Nah, you know what? There's some things you buy. You might buy something you might be watching an infomercial and you bought something and then you got it and you was like, why did I buy
I'm
this?
an Amazon impulsive spender, but all of that stuff feels necessary, so I can't even say it's the worst purchase.
That's all good. Favorite local black-owned restaurant?
Ooh. Blueprint Cafe?
Blueprint. I love Blueprint.
Yeah.
I met you at Blueprint.
Yes.
Yo, that's so funny. We didn't even officially meet. I just saw you in Blueprint. You came with your daughter.
Yeah.
And then I saw you at the event. What event did I see you at recently?
Oh, at a graduation party.
Graduation party. Yep. Your favorite go-to curly hair product?
I am currently in love with it's a line by, I'm so bad with names. Care.
Okay.
It's a Care line.
Fire.
And it's for curly girls. It's amazing.
You're a curly girl.
I'm a curly girl.
And the last question is, if someone narrated your life, who would you want it to be?
I would say my best friend. Yeah. Her and I know each other very intimately.
Somebody famous, though.
It has to be a famous person?
I'm asking that if it was somebody famous, who would it be?
Oh. Tracy Ellis Ross.
Tracy Ellis Ross. I think for me, Who would I go with? I think, let me lean into this real quick. Probably would be, oh man, that sucks. But yeah, Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman.
I love Morgan Freeman's voice.
Okay. I like Tracy's energy, and she's a curly girl, so I think she could bring some humor in there.
Absolutely. Well, look, we thank you for coming on the Unconventional Christian Podcast. Thank you for your time. Thank you for what you do. And definitely look forward to having you on here again.
Yes, it was absolutely my pleasure.
Can't wait. And make sure for anyone who's listening that you definitely follow her. We'll have all her information on our Spotify, Apple, YouTube links. And also make sure that you order your Doc in a Box.
Yes.
Support Black-owned businesses.
Yes.
Thank you guys. You guys have a blessed day. And this is another episode of the Unconventional Christian Podcast.